Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. So for the video this week, I listened to your feedback and I took one of your suggestions to cover. Our case this week comes from YouTube user GG-NYS. We're discussing the kidnapping and murder of Sara Ann Wood, whose case uncovered a suspect many labeled as a child serial killer. As always, I ask you to join me as we remember Sara Ann Wood and James Bernardo. Sara Ann Wood was born on March 4, 1981 in New York to parents Robert and Frances Wood. She was one of 3 children, having both a brother and a sister. Her father Robert was the pastor at Norwich Corners Presbyterian Church in Sauquoit, New York. The family attended the church and were very devout in their faith. Sara was described as being very intelligent and friendly. She was well liked by her peers at Sauquoit Valley Middle School, where she was part of the cheer squad. Sara was lively and had a passion for poetry and dance. The Wood family lived on Hackadam Road, located in the hamlet of Sauquoit, New York. Norwich Corners was located on the adjoining road named Roberts Road. Their home was located around a mile from the church. On August 18, 1993, Sara left her home riding her pink and white 10-speed mountain bike to attend summer Bible school at Norwich Corners. Her parents knew when to expect Sara home, so when she didn't arrive, they rightfully grew concerned. Sara's parents stated she was very responsible for her age and always came home. If she made plans, they would always know about them prior. So naturally, they reported her missing that afternoon. During the initial questioning of church officials, Sara was last seen around 2:30 p.m. riding uphill on Hackadam Road towards her residence. Her family provided a description stating Sara had brown shoulder-length hair, blue eyes, freckles, and wore glasses. She was last seen wearing a pink t-shirt with Guess Who embroidered on the front, turquoise shorts, and brown sandals. Her teacher at the church indicated she picked up some supplies before heading home. She was carrying a poster board, church songbook, and 8x10 transparencies. Her family quickly organized a group of volunteers from the neighborhood to scope out the immediate area, while the police gained the support of firefighters to branch out further into the woods. By nightfall, the only evidence of Sara discovered was her bike leaned against a tree and her supplies from the church in the bushes scattered, just a few hundred feet off Hackadam Road. It became clear Sara wasn't just missing, but a potential victim of foul play. Community outreach was incredible, with many providing not only search efforts, but donating refreshments to those spending hours searching for Sara. Between their neighbors and businesses, the Woods were able to raise a substantial reward as incentive to return Sara home safely. 5 days after the initial search, her parents established a headquarters for receiving all information, which they named the Rescue Sara Center. The Rescue Sara Center provided nonstop printing of missing persons posters, and some 400 volunteers worked day and night stuffing envelopes and completing any task necessary to keep Sara in the public eye. They placed her poster on toll booths, car windshields, utility poles, and in the front windows of businesses. To help keep up the demand, many printing companies across the state helped print and distribute her poster. Turquoise and pink ribbons were placed in public spaces as a means of not only guiding her home, but reminding the public she was still missing. After days of search efforts, law enforcement and the volunteer squads had no new information. Any tips that came in were followed, but all ended in disappointment. For a week, Sara was well known in upper state New York, but by the following Monday, she was known nationwide. Her posters spread from New York, and her story became the headlining news on both 48 Hours and America's Most Wanted. Sara became the poster child for missing children, and her parents begged for answers, asking anyone with any information to please come forward, and to not forget their little girl. Despite the extensive efforts, no new leads were discovered in Sara's case, and it essentially went cold. On the morning of January 7, 1994, 12-year-old Rebecca Savaros left her home around 7 a.m. She walked to the Notre Dame Middle School located in downtown Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Armed with her backpack and Discman, she walked along West Street when she was approached by a man she described as scruffy. He came up from behind but quickly matched her pace, following alongside her. She noticed he was speaking to her, but she couldn't hear anything over the high volume of her music. When she removed her headphones to ask the man what he needed, she quickly noticed a gun in his hands. He explained if she did everything he said, everything would be okay. For the moment, Rebecca complied, continuing her usual path up the street. Mentally, however, she was formulating a plan. They turned the corner onto North Street when the man switched sides but still held her close. He pointed at a truck up ahead and told her she was getting in. He continued trying to pull her towards the truck. They moved closer and closer. Rebecca knew if he successfully pushed her into the truck, she would never see her mother again. In a moment of desperation, Rebecca feigned an asthma attack and quickly sat down to try and catch her breath. This caused the man to move his hand from her jacket to her backpack. When he least expected it, Rebecca slipped out of the straps of her backpack and took off down North Street. The man watched as Rebecca ran to the nearest adult, where she frantically expressed her need for assistance. Several eyewitnesses noticed the altercation and initially thought it was a father-daughter disagreement, but when they saw the child run for her life, they knew it was malicious. The man was seen walking back to his truck with something in his hand. A witness decided to follow the truck for a short distance before pulling over at a nearby gas station to call the police about the incident. The witness was able to provide a description, a black GMC pickup truck, and 3 numbers of the license plate. It wasn't much, but it was a starting point. Rebecca and the eyewitnesses were able to provide a description of the suspect. A search for the vehicle was conducted in Pittsfield and nearby towns. A lead into the vehicle wouldn't be discovered until later the same day. A Pittsfield detective in Lanesboro received details about the attempted abduction. Before leaving Lanesboro to head back home, he noticed a truck parked outside of a home that matched the description from the abduction. So he stopped by the house to question the owner of the vehicle. Several people, including the suspect, were inside of the home. It was discovered the man in question was 43-year-old Lewis Lent Jr., a handyman. Lewis and the owner of the truck were questioned, where it was learned Lewis often borrowed the truck due to the owner being blind. He loaned the vehicle in exchange for odd jobs performed by Lewis. He explained to police he borrowed the truck the day prior and returned it that morning. When asked to come to Pittsfield Station to provide a statement and photograph, Lewis agreed. Lewis presented himself as a person of little interest. He described himself as a God-fearing Christian who donated his free time to the church and often volunteered to help friends in need. But while he was being questioned, his photograph was included in a lineup which both Rebecca and the eyewitness picked out on separate occasions. From this, Lewis was arrested in relation to Rebecca's attack. After his arrest, her backpack and a gun were discovered in his van, which was parked at the house where the pickup truck was found. Lewis denied having any involvement with the attempted abduction, but eventually he did provide a written statement admitting his guilt. When asked why he wanted to kidnap Rebecca, he informed police of his multi-point plan. He explained he wanted to abduct 11 vulnerable victims between the ages of 12 and 17. He was currently building a secure hidden room within his apartment, described as bunk beds from ceiling to floor, where he planned to store the girls. He wanted to have them at his disposal at any time. His plan wasn't complete yet, so to satisfy his desires, he tried to kidnap girls. Allegedly, Lewis detailed records of young children in the area that he was interested in. After his statement, a warrant was issued for his apartment where evidence of construction in his bedroom was in process, confirming what Lewis told police. Lewis was officially charged with kidnapping, larceny, assault with a deadly weapon, and battery in relation to Rebecca. During his 3-day interrogation, Lewis shockingly confessed to another crime, the 1990 murder of 12-year-old James Bernardo from Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Lewis admitted back in 1990 he was a janitor at the movie theater in the West Pittsfield Plaza. On October 22, 1990, around 5:30 p.m., he was on his way out when he noticed James on his bike nearby the theater. He went over to the boy and offered him some money to help move some chairs, which he accepted. The two went back into the theater where at knife point, he managed to apprehend James. He taped his hands behind his back and moved both the boy and his bike into his van. Lewis took James back to his apartment, where he made the victim undress to his underwear before tying him to the bed. Once secured, he took the boy's bike and discarded it in Silver Lake. He returned home where he waited until James fell asleep. Once asleep, he cut off his underwear, but the child woke up. He attempted to assault James, but was unsuccessful. Lewis decided at that point James had to die. The following morning, he loaded James back into his van and drove to Newfield, New York, where he took him into the woods. James was blindfolded and strangled to death with a rope. His nude body was discovered on November 21, 1990 by a hunter in the wooded area. The rope was still around his neck and he was left tied to a tree. Nearby, his clothes and tape were discovered, which police believe were the bindings used. Duct tape was placed over his mouth and across his eyes, holding a towel in place. After his unprompted confession, a detective from New York was sent to take his statement, and charges were formally pressed against him. On January 13, 1995, Lewis was convicted on the many charges against him in relation to Rebecca, who testified against him in court. The trial lasted 4 days, and after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty. He was given a sentence of 17 to 20 years in prison. He was imprisoned at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution. In June of 1996, Lewis faced the trial for the first-degree murder of James Bernardo. During the trial, defense attempted to argue that Lewis was not mentally competent to stand trial, since he suffered from an unspecified brain disorder. Lewis explained he had memory blackouts, at times saw flashing lights, and even heard a voice in his head he called Stephen, which was also his middle name. Lewis claimed he had an encounter with aliens, but the prosecution argued he was faking a mental illness. But when Lewis was found competent to stand trial, he decided to enter a plea of guilty. On October 16, 1996, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During this hearing, Lewis made another shocking confession. In private, he told his lawyer he wanted to plead guilty to another child murder case, Sara Ann Wood. Lewis explained that he often traveled between Massachusetts and New York, since that is where his family was from. In fact, James was discovered just a short distance from his childhood home. According to Lewis, he drove his van along the back roads looking for a victim when he came across Sara. He threatened Sara's life if she didn't get into the van. Once Sara was apprehended, he used tape to bind her hands before driving her further upstate. He claimed he took her into the Adirondack Mountains, where she was assaulted before he clubbed her to death with a tree branch, before burying her body. He stated he didn't bother to check if she was still alive, since he didn't like touching dead bodies. When asked about where she was buried, he refused to provide details. Initially, James was ready to plead guilty to the crime, but upon going into the courtroom and seeing her parents, he backed out. However, 9 days later, on October 25, 1996, in an empty courtroom, he pled guilty to the second-degree murder of Sara Wood, but he refused to provide details. The family wanted to know where Sara was, but Lewis continued to dodge the question. The district attorney offered Lewis a plea deal. If he helped locate Sara, he would be allowed to carry out his sentence in a federal prison rather than a state one, which Lewis originally requested. Hearing this, Lewis changed his tune by providing a map to the area he claimed Sara was buried. Per Lewis, he placed her in the Adirondack Mountains near Racket Lake, but he refused to divulge any more information. Initially, they wanted to bring him to the area to aid in the search, but his lawyer barred him from being included to either improve the map or expand on his confession. The search team expected to find Sara in a matter of 2 days with the help of heavy machinery and volunteers, but weather conditions were against them. The area was covered by snow and the ground was frozen, but search teams pushed on. They shoveled snow out of the way, and many officers used hands to sift through dirt for any sign of evidence. Her parents anxiously waited for the outcome of the search, but unfortunately, Sara was not located. They attempted another search in the spring where they were able to branch out further from the spot Lewis claimed, but again, nothing was discovered. Due to his lack of involvement, the deal was pulled from the table, and on April 11, 1997, he was sentenced 25 years to life for the murder of Sara. After his sentencing, Lewis stated he refused to give up Sara's true burial site because she was buried near another body he didn't want discovered. Sadly for the Wood family, the arrest of Lewis doesn't bring their daughter home. Both her father and mother tried to reason with Lewis by providing stories and Bible verses Sara loved, but he wouldn't talk. He just stared vacantly with the occasional nod. The Woods wanted to provide Sara with a proper burial, but to this day have been unable to do so. After his sentencing trial, Sara's brother stated, "You may think you have power over us because you know where Sara's body is. We know where Sara's soul is, so therefore you have no power over us." Since his initial arrest, police have attempted to connect Lewis with a series of missing children from Maine to Florida. He was suspected of the 1985 disappearance of Karen Wilson, the 1986 disappearance of Tammy McCormick, the 1986 disappearance of Kimberly Moreau, and the 1990 disappearance of Monique Santiago. To this date, he has not been linked to any of the before-mentioned cases, and the task force which was put in place to aid in recovery has since been disbanded. On July 15, 2013, from behind prison bars, Lewis confessed to another child murder from 1992. James Lusher, a 16-year-old teen, left his home in Westfield, Massachusetts on November 6, 1992. He was last seen riding his bike to his grandmother's house. His bike was discovered days later in nearby woods. His body has not been recovered. Currently, no formal charges have been filed against Lewis for this case. Lewis Lent is currently serving life without parole in Bridgewater State Prison. In the aftermath of Sara's murder, the Sara Ann Wood Rescue Center combined forces with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which still operates today in Utica, New York. It is the only geographically targeted poster distribution center in the country, providing 10,000 to 17,000 posters a week. In 1997, a bike ride was arranged called the Ride for Missing Children in Sara's honor. The Ride for Missing Children occurs on National Missing Children's Day, in which riders raise money to assist in the recovery of missing children. This ride has become an annual event in which all funds raised are donated to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Sara's classmates planted a tree in her memory at the middle school, and a ribbon-shaped memorial was also installed on the school grounds. In 1999, her graduating class placed a plaque in honor of their peer who didn't have the chance to grow up. The Center for Missing and Exploited Children worked tirelessly to remind the public how important it is to remember not only Sara, but the thousands of other children who are currently missing. They want all parents and guardians to know they offer many resources to help educate adults and children on safety. They provide speakers for schools and groups to help spread the word and educate. If you're in need of resources, please check the description of this video. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and thank you again for this suggestion. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so please leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I always appreciate your support. I hope you have an amazing week ahead of you, but for now, we have to part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.